Hey everybody, Hunter back again from Showtime Studios. We're going to do the second part of the brakes and calipers for the little build tutorial here. And we'll start out with, I've got everything cleaned up. Like I said, I was going to do in the first part of this brake tutorial session series, whatever you want to call it. But we've got everything cleaned up, ready to go. I've got the paints out here. I've got my brushes out here that we're going to use. And then I'm going to show you a little trick to holding the parts. And then we're going to paint them. Or actually, we're going to paint one rotor and one caliper. And then we'll do the rest of it off camera because it's the exact same process. So to jump right into this, as you can see, I have the craft foam here. And I have 3 of the rotors and calipers mounted, stuck into that foam. And what I like to do on stuff like that is sometimes the center hole in your rotor, you can take a standard or one of the bigger toothpicks, like I always use, and you can slide into it and it holds the part. But in the case of this, it has the big hole in the center, so the toothpick just slips right through it. So what I use to paint this type of stuff, whether I'm airbrushing it or doing it by hand, is another piece of the parts tree, the stretch sprue technique. So what I do is just come in and heat that up right here toward the center somewhere and just pull that out a little bit. And you're not trying to do anything fancy here because you're not actually using this for stretch sprue. You're using it for a totally different uh, procedure. And then what you'll end up with is a little pointy piece like this. Let's see if we can get it up here in the camera. Basically looks like that. And then you just take your rotor and you slip your rotor right up on it. And actually, this one here did not form the way I wanted it to. Let me try that again. And what happened is I got my taper a little bit too steep. And if you get the taper a little bit too steep, the parts won't stick to it. There we go. That's much better. Got that slid on there now. And then I just take the snippers and cut the excess off of the outside here about flush with the face of the rotor. And it gives you a little handle to hold on to while you're painting or doing any detail work on your rotors. And it's free, which is a good thing. So we're going to stick that down in there. Now, what we're going to be using on the painting part of this, get rid of this piece of stretch sprue here, is like I mentioned, we're going to be using the Vallejo, and this is the oily steel color. That's for the main rotor. And then we're going to be using the flat red from Vallejo for the caliper. And I also have a square of plastic laying here. I cut a lot of these out and have them ready. And I do that just for what we're doing right here. I'm going to shake up this oily steel. And this is a very thick paint. Like I say, it brushes very well. I highly recommend the Vallejo line if you're going to be doing any type of, brush work on your models. They have a lot of different colors and they work very, very well. So we're going to put a little bit of the Vallejo over there on the side of that little piece of plastic. And then we're going to shake up the flat red. And we're going to put a little drop of the flat red over on the other side. And try to keep them separated. You can make your square a little bit bigger if you want to. You can do it on a piece of, like poster board or something like that. I just use basically 15 thousandths plastic. So next we're going to move on to going ahead and getting this thing painted. Now when I do the rotors, I'll use a little bit of a wider brush. It's still small, but it's a wider brush than what we'll be using on the caliper. So we're just going to get a little bit of paint on the brush here. And I use cheap brushes. I don't spend a lot of money on brushes. I don't do a whole lot of brush painting. But when I do, it's usually on very small parts, and it's not something I'm hard on brushes, put it that way. My process of cleaning and stuff like that, I'm very hard on them. So I don't spend a lot of money on high dollar brushes. You guys that are out there painting figures and things like that, you want high dollar brushes and you take very good care of them. But for me, building, automotive subjects, I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of money on brushes that I know I'm just going to ruin anyway. I've got a bad habit of setting them in thinner sometimes and just leaving them set brush side down, which is a big no-no. So we're just brushing on the Vallejo now. Getting it all evened out. And that's on the inside and the outside. Now, the thing about the Vallejo paints, or, just about any other paint for that matter, that you're brushing on, try not to do a whole lot of brush strokes. You want to load the brush and just kind of, use the least amount of brush strokes as you can on the part. But this Vallejo, when it dries, the brush strokes tend to just disappear. So that's a good thing about this paint. That's why I like it for brushing. Now, most of the time, I would go in with the airbrush on the rotors, but we're keeping it as simple as we can on this one and showing some of the basic techniques for the beginning guys out there, and let them, make a choice whether they want to brush this or they want to go right straight into an airbrush. But like I say, most of the time, on my competition models, most of the models I build, I will make these little holders up and I'll go ahead and airbrush this. Actually, it's quicker to do it that way, and that's why I do it. Does the result look any better? Not really. It comes out about the same. All right, so we now have the silver, the oily steel brushed on, and I go through and do all of the oily steel color. So we're just going to pop that into our foam there real quick. I'm going to clean this brush up in the water that I've got sitting over here. I just kind of swirl it around in the water a little bit. And like I said, I'm hard on brushes. I take a cloth like this and I take my brush and I pretty much just wipe it back and forth. Not real hard, but I wipe it back and forth on there. And that's kind of a no-no for the figure painters and people like that really have nice brushes and take care of them. I don't. In fact, this is an old tester's brush made in Thailand. So it's not the highest dollar brush out there by any means. But hey, it works. So now we're going to go on to a smaller tipped brush. This is, which one is this? Is a 10-0 brush. And we're going to go in with the flat red from Vallejo. And we're going to paint the caliper. And same basic process. Like I say, I'm just using a smaller brush on this because I want to cut in real close to everything. And, the beginning guys out there that's doing this, I would suggest letting the silver dry first before you go in to do the red. That way you don't have a blending of the two colors. Um, but if you have a real steady hand and you want to try it when it's still wet, go for it. It can be done. I'm doing it right here. So no big deal. And like I say, just try to load the brush and just drag the paint, with the least amount of brush strokes as you can. And if you see the paint start to thin out as you're brushing across the surface, go ahead and load the brush again and drag back over that. And that way it eliminates the brush marks. And especially for competition, you don't want to see a brush mark in a model because that's points off. But for you guys that are building your first models and just getting into the hobby, you don't have to worry about all that. But just load the brush and keep it all, all the strokes to a minimum. I like to do long strokes if I can. Like on the top of that caliper, I went from the front of it to the back of it. And we're going to get the inside of it done here. And sometimes you'll notice that you may need to go back over once it dries. You may need to go back over and kind of, darken things up a little bit or touch them up or something like that. That's perfectly fine. In fact, we'll go back over this whole assembly again because we're going to do some black panel liner on it to create some shadows and just kind of make everything look not so simplified. And I got one more spot to paint on this one right up front here. And this red, it brushes beautiful. I mean, it's a real nice color to paint. The consistency is perfect for using a brush on it. It has enough body to it where it doesn't, when you put the brush down, it doesn't want to flow down into, the other part or get on something. It's a very nice paint to work with. So there we have the rotor and the caliper all painted up inside and outside and pretty much ready to go other than doing some detail work on it. And you would just do the other four with the same process. Nothing changes there. And I'm going to clean this brush out here in the water a little bit. Come over there and do my no trick. Now, some of these Vallejo colors, you'll notice it takes a little bit more to get them out of the brush than others, and red is one of them. It takes a while to get the red out of a brush. But like the oily steel, that comes out pretty much the first cleaning. It comes right out of there. So try to get your brushes as clean as you can. That way, when you go to get them back out, they're nice and soft and they're not all stiff from old paint drying in them. So that pretty much wraps up this part of the tutorial. Like I say, I'm going to go back in and do the same thing on the other three rotors and calipers. And when we're done with that, we'll probably do a little bit of a panel liner on it to pop out the shadows and the details. And then we'll get them, after the chassis painted, we'll get them glued to that. And that part will be finished up. So we will be moving on next to the spray booth. We're going to go ahead and get the chassis in primer, and we'll do all that on camera at the spray booth. And of course, the engine and stuff won't be in here, but we're going to get everything primed, and then we'll get some paint down on that, and we'll show you those steps right over there. And then we will be moving on to the interior. We start putting the lower body together and the side panels, the seats, the steering column, the dash. It's actually pretty simplified on the interior too, which is a good thing because you can't see a lot of it. So with these small windows that's in here, you can't see a whole lot of anything inside the model. But we're going to detail that up a little bit, and that's another good area to practice on. So we'll show you those steps. So that's all we've got for this one. Like always, if you got any questions or concerns, leave me a comment on the video and we'll try to answer them for you or address them or whatever we need to do. So until next time, this is Hunter from Showtime Studios, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.